Well, hello everyone, and welcome. I just want to talk to you about, one of my, I guess, my second favorite projects that I've worked here in NOAA about. It is the NOAA R&D database. And so it is truly a project management tool. Um, a central repository of where we can put all of NOAA's R&D projects. And with that, information about those projects. So that when these questions come up, these taskers come by, which they often do, we often have to respond to them, that you have a tool now of R&D projects where you can mine that data because it's in a database structure. So that's sort of the intro. Meka Laster here. I'll start it off, and then I'm going to turn it over to Shanie, and she will take it after a few slides. So keep in mind, project management tool. So what is the NOAA R&D database? And you can read here, it's secure, it's web-based. So again, it is a database. And with the database is an interface for the users to put in their information. And once those R&D projects are entered, then we ask the program managers here in NOAA to go in and make sure that record is accurate and has the correct information in it. And with that, the program manager approves it. So that's what we mean by secure. Now go to the next slide. Did I skip? Okay, thank you. Purpose. So this all came about because a while ago, over 15 years ago, we didn't have this tool, of course, and questions came down. And in order to be able to respond to those questions, taskers had to be issued, calls had to be made, and individuals had to take time out of their day to respond to it. So with this tool now, you can promote information sharing to improve transparency. You can track. So as the projects are put in, the planned information, then you can come back later on and put the actual information. So this is what we plan to do. And then you come back later and say, this is what we actually did. So you have start dates, you have end dates, you have deliverables, you have milestones, you have benefits and outcomes, and different types of information. So it supports planning, it supports tracking progress, enables efficient corporate reporting on performance because you can mine it now because it's in a database structure. Inform identification and assessment, capture trends. So one of the things the data fields is readiness level. And there are 9 different readiness levels. And there's an NEO out there on what they are, 1 through 9. And so if it goes in, let's say you enter the project and it's in its early stages of research. So that would probably be like a readiness level of 2 or 3. And then what you can do is now you can track the progress. As this research project unfolds, you can see how it moves from a 2 or 3 to a higher one. And hopefully to a point where it either goes into operation or sometimes projects don't necessarily reach a 9. They do stay at a 2 or 3. But the thing is, you can capture that information. You can see how it progresses. You can see what the trends are. So this is a tool that enables that. So we can know all the different projects that are at 2s and 3s. We can see when it moved to a 3 or 4, and on and on. So what you're doing here is you are providing a foundation for portfolio management. Once you get all these projects in and you're keeping it up to date, let's say once a year, we try to at least have a data call once a year, then over time, you can know what your R&D portfolio is. And you can take a look at that. And you can ask questions. And you can project and you can forecast. So where did this authority for this effort come from? The Research Council. So NOAA's Research Council, and underneath the Research Council is a working arm, if you will, working group called the Research Development and Enterprise Committee. So all this work with this NOAA R&D database was done under our DEC, Research Development and Enterprise Committee. And so they oversaw this entire effort to bring this into fruition. And you have representation from all your NOAA line offices. So that sit at that, they meet bi-weekly, excuse me. So they have been involved and engaged in this whole process. And we've also reported up on this effort to the Research Council. So in 2016, they voted to go ahead and implement this effort. So let's talk about a little about the team. Again, I'm Meka Laster, and I work with Shanie on this. Danielle Tillman was on this prior to me. I came on in 2016. Shanie, you came on in 2017. And we work underneath, this project's underneath Gary Matlock and OAR. Then we have our IT team. Right now we have a vacancy for a database developer, but we have Timothy Snyder, Laura Wilson, Christopher Chi, Christian, and I cannot pronounce his last name, Subi, thank you, all backing us up on this effort from the IT perspective. And then the NRDD admin at NOAA.gov account is where you can email us with any questions that you may have or any difficulties that you may have with using this database. So after the 2016 and the NOAA Research Council and the chief scientist said, yep, go ahead and implement it. Our first data call was in 2017 in the summer. And our first FY17 project plans were entered. And what we did was we didn't want to overwhelm people. So we literally said, these fields are mandatory and these fields are optional, just to get us started. And so that's what we did in 2017. And we got a fair amount of data. And since that time, we've had some calls. We did a partners call for the Research Council in support of the Research Council, and that came in the fall of 2017. They simply wanted to know, who are we partnering with? Cooperative institutes, cooperative science centers, other entities out there. So we did a call for that, because as you put in this R&D project information, what it is, title of it, benefits, outcomes, description, you can also enter in, who are you partnering with, whether it be in the private sector, the public sector. So again, they wanted to know about who are those partners. We did another data call in the spring of this year. And then we had the opportunity to meet with the NOAA administrator. So we had another data call prior to that in August. And so that brings us up to this point. We're going to do another call at the end of January. We're going to let it be open for a period of a month. So it'll be the end of January to the end of February. And what we're asking people to do is to put in your FY18 actuals and your FY19 plans. Now, we understand in the grants world and other, it takes, you may not have all the information you need right now, but the system is never closed. So what we're asking people to do is to put the information that you have right now into the system starting in January, and as the year progresses, go back in and update the information and add to it. Site redesign. So we learned a lot since 2017. We got a lot of feedback. We're still getting feedback. We're still open to feedback. So we have some exciting things that we're planning in terms of the site redesign, different look and feel from what it is today. Some additional data fields that we'll be adding, some additional features that will also be added, which will hopefully enhance our data entry process. And I'm not going to steal the thunder. I'll just say it's coming. And so we're looking forward to that in the middle of 2019. And now I'll turn it over to my partner, Shanie.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Shanie Gal-Edd. As Meka said, I've been on the project since 2017, and it happened to have become my favorite project. I love NRDD, mostly for just its potential to affect so many of the things that we do at NOAA. You can see here, NRDD, I have a circle in the center and all of the different things that it touches. But first, to clarify, we're not collecting the data that is produced by the R&D project. So we're not collecting scientific data. We're collecting project management data. So those are things like project timeline and who's the accountable entity, like which office is taking ownership for this project primarily. And that's determined by who's the primary NOAA funder, is who should be putting in the project. As Meka talked about, transitions through the readiness levels and who you're transitioning it to, which office, who's adopting it, what type of transition, whether it's operations, commercial, and so on. Research partnerships, as Meka talked about, we have the ability to track, not just NOAA partners, but again, all of our cooperative institutes, all of our external partners. So whether that's private industry, foreign, domestic, we're going to be capturing all of that information and have already started to. You can also link your project to strategic plans. So this will help with our strategic planning work. We have the NOAA Next Generation Strategic Plan in there, the DOC Strategic Plan, as well as the 5-year R&D plan. So you can link up to any of the objectives with those plans. You can say what objectives your project is working towards and addressing. And that can also help us as we go back in the strategic plans and say, how did we address these goals and objectives? Now we have a way that you can go back and say, well, these 50 projects addressed objective 1, and so on and so forth. There's description fields. We put that in for the purpose of helping especially to put the information into plain terms. So we're not going so much for the scientific abstract, but to really explain, why are you doing this project? Why is this important to the American people? And then that information can be used to communicate to non-experts, to communicate to Congress. And so we want to make this really useful to anybody who's having to understand what's happening within NOAA's R&D portfolio and to communicate that to any number of audiences. We also are building relationships with other databases at NOAA. We know how many different things are going on here, and we know that we're asking a lot of our scientists to be entering the data. So we've been working really hard to build relationships so that we can create linkages between databases at NOAA, and we're not asking people to enter the same information in multiple places. Rather, we're trying to get to the point where we're doing the work on our end. So we've been building relationships, for instance, with EORS, who's represented here. That's the NOAA Observing Systems database. And then we also are working with the library. We're going to be trying to put in linkages to the R&D projects and then how those result in publications, for instance. And so on and so forth. We also have been pulling in information from other project databases like VLab that already exist, like Sea Grant's peer database. So NOS's NCOS has a database as well. So we realized that there has been, before NRDD came along and became a central database, lots of line offices and offices within those have been sort of managing this on their own. So we've been trying to work with those groups to pull in their data so that we can make sure that everyone knows if they put it in the one place, we're getting it in. You don't have to do it twice. We also are adding, so this is some of our new fields, but we want to track compliance reporting. Things like, do you have an environmental data management plan? We were considering working to do NEPA, but that might be complicated, but we are going to talk about that in the future. We also are going to be adding fields to link to legislative mandates, and that's really important for congressional reporting as well. Resource allocation, we have kind of general fields and then more specific fields so that you can put in what's the, I guess, the estimated annual cost of a project. And then also we can get into more specifics so that we're not just tracking the money that's allocated to the project, but also the FTE hours, HPC hours, ship time, and all the other things that go into a successful R&D project. We also are linking to the performance measures right now just at the NOAA level. So like the APPR and so on, you can link your project and say whether that's feeding into one of your line offices NOAA level performance measures. And that's probably not even everything that we do and all of the potential, but you can see how NRDD has the potential to touch so many areas of work and bring all of that information together. So this is a little bit redundant to what we had in the earlier slide about the purposes, but we're trying to improve transparency and coordination. Let's see, I don't want to repeat anything. It's basically the same. So we know the uses of R&D database, but I wanted to go over briefly the misuse of the R&D database. I think it's really important to understand what the intended purpose is of the database and also to understand the limitations. Because if you, as with any data tool or any technology, if you kind of use it in the wrong way, it can do more harm than good. So I think it's very important to know that for now, this still is a young database. And because of that, we've been getting more and more data every year, obviously, but we still don't have everything. So keep in mind, if you were to run a query, that what you're seeing is not necessarily at the moment an accurate picture of everything that's going on at NOAA. What you're seeing is everything that has been entered into the database, okay? But that doesn't mean that the project isn't being done somewhere. We're still working on increasing our participation, and it takes events like this to get the word out and to make sure that people know about this new database. And we do expect that, as with any large centralized database system, it's probably going to take about 3 to 5 years to have a really comprehensive, I can't remember what I'm saying, source of data, I guess. NRDD also does not represent an organization's full portfolio. So keep in mind, you're only putting in projects that are R&D projects. So this shouldn't be used to try to evaluate everything that your line office is doing. Even a line office like OAR, which is supposedly all research, OAR is still doing, administrative work, outreach, and other types of work. So things like that would not fall under the R&D database. Also, I should point out that when anything is in operations, even if it's generating data, so things like observing systems, monitoring systems, we don't consider that a part of R&D if it's already operational. R&D is more about if you're answering a scientific question, and so you're trying to address a scientific hypothesis, and maybe that's ending up in a paper, a journal article, or so on, that would fall under the NOAA R&D database. So if you're using the observing system data to answer a hypothesis, that particular question would be a project in the database. And also, if you were to want to build upon the technology or improve the technology, perhaps you're creating a version 2 of an existing system that's out there, that would be that would be a project in the database, because that would be considered a development project. But anything that's already operational, that's just sort of being maintained and it's spitting out data that can be used by anybody, that actually doesn't fall under the R&D database. Also, R&D projects are not meant to be a standard unit of measure. So we don't want people to assume, oh, this office has 50 projects in the database, and this other office has 600 projects, so this office is doing more work than the other. It's really not about that. You define the project based on, as I started to say, sort of what's the hypothesis that you're trying to answer, or what's the technology you're trying to develop, and therefore our projects range from short-term projects to extremely long-term projects, expensive, inexpensive, and so we want to make sure that people aren't just drawing sort of incorrect conclusions about how many projects are being done. And finally, NRDD is not a budget tracking tool. We want to make that very clear. Although we do collect some resource information, that resource information is meant to be an estimate, And it's meant to sort of provide context to the project so that you can understand. That helps with when we're saying that projects are not meant to be a standard unit of measure. It helps to understand how much is being spent on a project. That can give you an idea of the size and scope of it. But we don't want NRDD to be used as a budget tracking tool. We don't want offices to be, management to be looking and saying, we gave you this much money and like you only produce this much. That's not really the intent of NRDD. Okay, project criteria. I touched on some of this, but it's important to understand what is and is not a project. I already mentioned that the entity that is primarily funding the project at NOAA is the one that will be entering the project, and then all of the other offices will be added as partners. We know how much partnership and collaboration goes on at NOAA, and so we had to kind of make a decision. Either we could choose to have the people executing, so maybe the main PI entering, or we could have the main funder. But we had to decide, because no matter which way you do, you're going to have sort of missed projects or overlap. So we have to be very careful with that. This means that when you have the primary funding entity entering the data, it means two things. Number one, they need to just communicate and say, oh, don't enter this project, we've already got it in, right? So it kind of requires that people contact each other when they're in partnership and make sure that they know who's responsible for entering the data. And secondly, it actually has been an interesting exercise because we've learned that a lot of like these high up funding entities are so maybe a few steps removed from the work that's being done with their funds, that they actually have to do some detective work to figure out where is their money going and what is being done. And so it's actually turned out to be, I think, a really worthwhile exercise for them. One of the reasons that we didn't choose to have the PIs be the ones that enter the project, even though they may be most intimately aware of what's going on with the project, is that because it's a federal database and because it does have funding information in it, we're not allowed to have CIs and other non-federal employees in the database. You can have federal contractors, but we can't allow our university partners and so on to be directly in the database. So what we have people do is the person entering the data will reach out to the PIs and get information from them, and then they'll put in the data for us, and that's usually a Fed or a federal contractor that's doing that. To be a project, you must have, now I'm acting like projects are are creatures, but a defined endpoint, a defined objective, at least one, and a final deliverable. There also needs to be a defined timeline. So you don't want something that's just going to go on endlessly, and that's where we get into like the operations or the observing systems that are in operations. Those are sort of like, oh, well, those go on forever. Okay, that's not an R&D project. We're looking for things that have a defined timeline and just defined resources I already went over. And finally, every project should have a designated single readiness level as defined in the NAO here, 216-115A. We do recognize that sometimes under a particular, I don't want to use the word project, but under a particular technology, you might have different aspects of it that are at different readiness levels. Like some of it might be in operations, other aspects of it might be in development for the next version, and so on. And so if you have something that you say, oh, well, it's at multiple readiness levels, our answer to that would be then make a project for each of those readiness levels. Each of those aspects should be separate. No project in the R&D database should be at a readiness, should be at more than one readiness level simultaneously. Okay. However, you will start at a specific readiness level and then progress through those. So we do expect it to progress, but at any given point in time, it should only have one RL level. This is the structure in the current database. This will be changing somewhat in the redesign, but we have some main tabs here under document plans. We have what we used to call mandatory information. Now we're calling it basic information because we've gotten to the point where we're asking that all fields are mandatory. But that's the basic information, description, PI, point of contact, and your milestones. Then there's the personnel and partners tab. then the performance measures tab, strategic plan linkages, and then we have a place where you can add keywords, URLs, and your high-level resources. And then finally, we have a tab for the more detailed resources. When you come in later in the year and you report your actuals, that's in a different section. You can see in blue under Report Actuals. We have an area where you can upload files. And then at the end of your data entry, you can click on Review at a Glance, and there's sort of a text document that summarizes everything and indicates any missing fields. And then under Workflow History and Take Action, that's where the data enterer would hit Submit, or perhaps the project approver would go in. They would click on Review at a Glance and look at the information there, and then go down to Workflow History, Take Action, and under Take Action, they would hit Approve. So that's sort of where all the actions can be taken. This is the workflow. So at the beginning, your FMC, and I realize that's an OER-centric term, but I guess you would call it like your lab or program or whatever a large division is under a line office, in your line office. They would develop, or they would identify their available R&D projects. And then they would be reaching out to those PIs or whoever is responsible and knowledgeable about those projects. Oftentimes, within a program or lab, underneath that, I guess there's the divisions. Typically, we'll have one main point of contact for each division, and we train those people, and those are our data enterers, and they're the ones that reach out to whoever's doing the work, get the data, and then they're responsible for putting it into to NRDD. Once they enter the data, and I'm going to add here that you can put it in manually into the database, and part of the redesign is going to be enhancing the speed and flexibility of how you can enter projects directly into the database. We also right now have an import template that's an Excel spreadsheet that you could just populate all of the fields, send it to us, and we can upload all of those projects into NRDD instantly. So that's a process that if you're interested in, you can just email the NRDD admin team and we'll talk you through it. And that's really helpful if you have multiple projects, obviously, and you need to get them in quickly. Once the project data is entered by the data enter, either manually or through the import template, then you need to, they would hit submit, and then the FMC's leadership, and this would be the approver, would have to go in and approve the project. And this is a data quality measure. We need to make sure that there is somebody who is enough so in a position of authority to be able to say, I verify that this information is correct and I'm responsible for this project. And so that person would go ahead and approve the project information. Oftentimes that's like a lab deputy director. Those are typically the people that go in. So we don't train them in all of the ins and outs of NRDD per se, but we'll train them at least on how to review the data in a project and go through the approval process, which is really just click approve. Once the project is approved, only then does it become visible to everyone else at NOAA, because we don't want people to be monitoring and querying data that's not officially necessarily correct or authorized. So when you have the project approved, that's when it becomes visible. That's when it would start showing up on our pie charts and all the other things that we do to sort of share how many projects we have in the database. Accessibility of NRDD. At the moment, we have about 275 users, but I know we got 2 more yesterday. It's a steady, yeah, it's a steady trickle. So, I mean, that was an estimate, but we can say 277. We probably get about 5 new users a week or so. It's a really steady trickle. Then there's, punctuated by typically when we have a data call, it explodes a little bit, but we expect that it's just going to keep increasing until we have everyone at NOAA. Originally, it was designed to have a public-facing side. For now, it's on hold because of the political environment. And so we're not trying to draw attention necessarily to our R&D portfolio right now, but We are building it with the expectation that one day we would like to have certain very basic aspects of the information, like maybe who's the PI, the point of contact, and what's the name of the project. But it would be a very limited amount of information. But part of what we wanted to do was create transparency so that people in other agencies could reach out and know who to reach out to if they wanted to partner at NOAA. So that'll be coming hopefully down the line. We have different access levels. So if you were to try to become a user, we would then respond to you and say, what are you going to be using the database for? Are you just viewing projects? Are you entering data? Or are you a project approver? And then a few of us are admins, and probably none of you are admins. But anyway, so once you let us know sort of who you are, what office you're in, and what type of access you need, we grant you the access, and from then on, you're in. And we can change your access at any time if you just send us an email. This is the way the current website looks. This is sort of the project search page. So if you can't really see it at the top, but our homepage has a dashboard with an overview of projects broken down in various ways. This is the project search. We have numerous filters where you can search by title, keyword. You can search words within the description fields. So this is really powerful if you want to go in today, get access to NRDD, and just sort of search and see which approved projects pop up in a subject area that you have of interest. You can put in a country name. You could put in, an observing system. You could put in a topic of any kind and see what comes up. You can also search by, you can search by a line office project number. So I think that's an interesting one. When people put in their data, since we realize that many offices have their own database, we've added a field where you can put in the ID number of that project that's in your specific office so that you can link them up, and so on. And then you can see sort of the structure that we talked about earlier down below, the document plans, the report actuals, and the other tabs that we talked about. So we have an upcoming data call. Meka, do you want to talk about this?
Sure.
Okay.
So the next data call where we're looking for the FY18 actual data. So you've already entered your what you plan to do in 18, and now you're coming back and you said, okay, so this project we said was going to start on this date and end on this date. Now this is when it actually did start and this is when it actually ended. What do we produce out of that effort, whether it be a paper or a model or something out of that, what the deliverables are. So we want to know that type of information. In addition, we want to know in FY19, what do you plan to do in FY19? What efforts do you have underway? So again, we're going to leave it open for a month, but the system never closes. So that means even after that month, and you want to go back in and update the record, the project record, you can do so. We're also going to offer some training sessions in January. And this is the link to the actual site for the NOAA R&D database. So the two training sessions are going to be Tuesday, January 15th and Tuesday, January 29th. And there we're going to get more into the system itself. What does it look like? How do you use it? How do you put data into it? What are the different data fields? So it'll take some time and just sort of actually walk you through the system. We're going to use the 10th floor training room to do so. So you can actually see how it's done and how what's available in the system. So what we want you to do is we're going to have these two sessions. We want you to sign up for either one. Again, you can either come to the training room. We're going to use GoToMeeting for that session. And if you indeed have any questions about that, use that NRDD admin at NOAA.gov. So this is where you get your hands on. This is the URL for the R&D database again, and the email account. There are some additional information. These slides, we talked about the NAO, which talks about readiness levels 1 through 9. There is more detailed information about each level. You can get that out of the NAO, so we added that here. Definition for a transition plan. What is that? What is a transition plan? What does it contain? There's an NAO in regards to that. So this is really reference material. So what's coming, and coming really soon, is we've added a reporting tool, or adding a reporting tool. I can't say the name of it. I'm really excited about it. But basically, this will help us mine that data and be able to pull out data and graphically depict it in different ways. So we bar graphs, all kinds of, a little bit of word clouds, a little bit of other things that you can do with that data to sort of display some of the information and share some of that information. So,
good question. So, is this data the representation of the contents of the database, or are you talking about you can query on? It must be the contents of the.
It's the contents of the database.
Search by line office and do like a word cloud of the descriptions.
So, for example, I did one based on readiness level, and I looked at all the different line offices, right, just to see how, where, you know, are they at 2s and 3s, most of them in this line office, or are they 7 and 8s? I did one to show what are the things that are coming out of these research efforts. Are they reports? Are they publications? Are they, what comes out of it? You know, a model, what have you. And it can sort of depict that in a graphical way. So that's what we're trying to do too. So, you know, a lot of work goes into putting it in. But the important thing is, what can you get out of this information? So this tool will enable us to do that. And I'm gonna let you wanna come back and do the keywords? Okay. So keywords, as today, this is what it looks like, but it's gonna be a little different in the site redesign. The one good thing about searching and filtering is being able to do a keyword search. So as the information, and we're asking to people listening and on this webinar, when you put a project in, please select some keywords. It'll enable us when these taskers come along and these questions come along that we can do some keyword searching. Right now, we have a number of entry projects, and we're just asking people to go back and going forward to go ahead and put some keywords in there, because that'll help us on a particular topic. We can be able to pull things out easily for whatever query comes down the line. So right now it's a checkbox. So basically you have this laundry list, and the ones that apply, check the box. Simple as that. So, but this will be very helpful if it's completed. So that's a plea for that. And the release we talked about, which is the site redesign, is coming in the middle part of this year. Again, all that information, all those lessons learned that we've encountered since 2017 when we went live, we're taking that information and we're using it to redesign the site. So the interface will look differently. It will operate a little faster. Some other things are coming. So we're pulling it all together. Plus the reporting tool will also be available for us to use as well. So we're really excited about that. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to steal the thunder and the surprise. That's it. So now, questions. All right. Obviously, come on. I'll try to repeat the question.
This is Jennifer Wester from TPO.
Okay.
My question is regarding the keywords. You say that you can check the box on a list of keywords.
Yes.
Can you enter your own keyword?
If it's not on the list, you can suggest a keyword, and there's a mechanism to do that.
Okay.
Yes.
And then
Go ahead.
We don't want to have an infinite number of keywords, because then it just sort of loses its importance. So if enough projects request the same or similar keyword, then we will add it to the list. So yes, please do add ones that you feel are important to your project as a suggestion. And there is a mechanism to do that in the system today.
Great.
Any other questions, thoughts? Yes.
How do you do your data call? Is it a formal request to an AA? Does it come down from the top, or is it just a scattershot request? How do you do your data call?
How do we do our data calls? So actually, we post it on our site. We email all the NRDD users that are in the system today, just to let them know. The RDEC knows, and so they also pass it down to their offices, because the RDEC has a representation from all the line offices.
Sorry, who's the RDEC?
Research Development Enterprise Committee,
Okay, thank
which is a working group underneath the Research Council. So before we even go forth with a data call, we go to the RDEC. We say we would like to do a data call. And they say yes, okay, we support that. And then we issue it. So what's your thought on that? I see something. You have a question about that?
No, I didn't know. Sometimes, I remember one time I saw a flyer on the bulletin board for the update.
I was just going to add that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then I thought
also do.
maybe it would be a formal announcement. Let's say it would go to NOS and then work its way down to. I work in NCOS,
Okay, thank you.
and so I haven't seen a formal request coming from NCOS headquarters in quite a while. So I was just curious.
Okay.
I'm going to repeat that for the people on the phone. The question was, I work at NCOS and I haven't seen a formal request come down. And I really appreciate that question, because the truth is we've kind of tackled this from a bottom-up approach in a lot of ways. We've sort of found points of contact in each office and we use them to help us, but it's a limited approach. And so we do, our contact at NCOS is the database at NCOS. So we work with them. And unfortunately, as with all of the other databases, they have many of the fields that we need, but not all of them. So what we've been doing with them is we get an import from their database, and then we're working with them through the higher level issues, like they don't collect readiness levels. So can you add a field for readiness levels? So we've been working with them for about a year now. And that type of thing takes time to change an entire line office and get, or division, and get them all sort of initiated into the world of readiness levels and all of that. I think we have missing spots, certainly, in each line office. So recently we went to the RDEC and we showed them graphs. We said, at each of your line offices, this is where we have data from. Who are we missing? And can you please go reach out to those people? And so it's differed by line offices. Some of them said, I'll go to the council at the top and we'll try to trickle down. And others said, oh, I think you're missing this one office, so let me try to find a point of contact there. But we're piecing it together, and we're trying to do outreach events like this to try to get more awareness. And a lot of times it's word of mouth, people sign on, and but we would appreciate to have a point of contact at each line office, certainly.
So that answers my question. The reason I haven't seen the request is because you're accessing the NCOS portfolio management database, and I enter the stuff in there, so it's good. So everything's fine.
Oh, good.
He said, so that's the reason, because I enter my data in NCOS's database, and that's why no one's been bothering me.
Right.
That was me paraphrasing, but he said that's good. Yeah. Any other questions? Are there questions on the line?
We have a ton of questions online.
Really? Okay.
So dialing back towards the beginning of the talk, you were saying that the primary funder needs to ensure the project. What if a project is split 50-50?
The question was, at the beginning we said that the primary funder is responsible for entering the project. What if a project is split 50-50? Who would enter it? I don't know. I mean, my answer would be talk to your other partner and just sort of decide. We don't have any specific guidance to say. Do you have anything to add?
No,
Okay.
That's what we've been telling people to do. decide between the two entities.
Yeah. Get on the phone and talk to your friends.
As follow-up, can they start data entry now, or do they have to wait for the call?
The question is, can they start the data entry now, or do they have to wait for the data call? You can absolutely access the system at any time. So we would love if you went in and got a jump start. That can only give us more time to help you.
And then questions about the site redesign. Were users included in the site redesign study?
Okay. The question was for the redesign, did users participate in the site redesign study? The answer is that we get complaints, suggestions, questions, issues, troubleshooting along the way, and we had a spreadsheet of like 189 issues and requests that we either thought ourselves we needed to fix or people had reached out. Oftentimes people ask us for things that many other people have said the same thing. So the redesign was really meant to address all of those issues. And then we've kind of tackled it. We have in our redesign a few different releases. So the lowest hanging fruit is we're sort of relaunching the current system with all of its current fields, but it'll be faster, more user-friendly. And then later, in our later deliveries, we're going to be adding the new fields, adding the new features. And when I say new features, I mean like creating templates that you could, if you have certain project data that repeats over and over again, that you could save that as a template and not have to repopulate that information, that you could copy information from project to project, that you could update multiple projects at the same time. And so we believe that we've really addressed a lot of it. We also have a focus group that we haven't brought in yet because we haven't, we reach out to them now and then when we have questions, but we haven't brought them in quite yet. But when we get into the testing phase and we have something for them to work with, we'll be certainly using them.
To follow up on that, there's a question about how do labs that input data, how do they provide feedback on the present system?
How do labs that enter data provide feedback in the current system? There's a feature inside the system where you can, it's at the top of the main page where it says, I think, suggestions or something like that, and they can put in feedback there. I actually think that the best way, and the way most people reach us, is through the NRDD.admin@NOAA.gov. That goes directly to Meka and to me, and we always respond there.
Question about the reporting tool. Will the reporting tool be something that you provide to all users? And if they want to use the reporting tool to help drive science or other data, what do they need to do?
Did that come from Tristan? Okay. Thank you, Tristan. That's an excellent question. The question was, will the reporting tool be available to everyone? What was the second part?
And what if they want to use the reporting tool to help drive science or other data?
Okay, and what if they want to use the reporting tool to drive science or other data? The reporting tool, for now, will not be open to everybody, and the reason is it costs money for us to get licenses for everyone. So what we will do is, if you would like access, let us know and we will get it for you. We have had to provide estimates to IT. We're trying to get to the point where we can justify that it would be worth buying, instead of a per person licensing situation. I think once we get past a certain threshold of enough users, it would make more sense for all of NOAA, and we're working with other offices. It would then make more sense to just purchase, I can't remember what it's called, maybe Tristan's writing me the answer, but like a NOAA-wide license, and that in that case, everyone would be able to just get in and be able to use it. So as our usership increases, we're hoping to get to that point. So, and in terms of using the tool to address questions, depending on your level of access, you may be able to pull in data that's outside of NRDD, and I think that addressed another question earlier. So it will be for sure for everyone pulling information directly from NRDD, but it will also, for some people, if you have a higher level of access, you can bring in external data, merge those, and you would take some training for you to understand the tool. But we could, I think what we would like to do is get some power users, like maybe one per line office or something like that, maybe more than that, and train those people on how to use the tool, because it's quite advanced, as many of these BI tools are, and then have that person available to do whatever is needed in their office.
So the R&D database has planning and actuals.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about actuals? Does this include lists of deliverables?
Okay. Can you tell us more about actuals? Does it include lists of deliverables? Do you want to take this one?
Sure. If I think I understand it, when you put in the project the first time, it asks for a final deliverable. So what do you plan to produce out of this? So is it, like I said, a research, you're going to do a paper? Are you going to produce a product? So when you actually conduct the work and it's done and you go back in, then you might have more, of course you probably have the paper that you're going to release or submit. And then you'll have that product, but there may be some other deliverables that may have come out of that research effort that you want to list as well. And so you want to add that, those deliverables into the project record as well. And hopefully I answered your question. If not, come back at me again.
And I can add something.
Okay.
Yeah. I have to admit I was thinking about something else while you're talking, so maybe you did say it. But for each milestone or deliverable that you put in, it will ask you in the actuals, it kind of pre-populates what you had already put in, and it asks you, did you, yes or no, complete this, and what was the actual date?
Which it was completed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what you already said?
No.
Okay.
You can add that.
Okay.
Okay. There are a few more questions. Will a data entry template be available for FY19 new data and maybe FY18 actuals?
So the import template is the question is, will the import template be available for FY18 actuals and FY19 planned? So the import template is available today for FY19 planned. As for actuals, it is not available because the data, we don't have something that you don't want to touch on the data that's already in the database. So we don't have a template that will keep from doing that. It can only be new information.
Yeah, only new projects can use the import template. From there, any edits you do, you have to do in the system.
And is this database used by NOAA, DUS, or other high-level decision makers?
Yes. So the question is this database used by DUS and other high-level NOAA leadership? And the answer to that and the response to that is an emphatic yes.
Do you know who the line office point of contacts will be? Could you provide a list and so forth?
We do know the line office point of contacts. We do have a listing. And yes, we could provide that.
Can we send that out in a follow-up email with
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. And then if people want to add their names and request to be added as contacts, that would be
lovely.
Incredible. We would love it. Yeah.
Yes.
What exactly are staff using for the ID number for the project?
The question is, what are staff using for the ID number or the project number? We're finding that, for example, in the Weather Service Virtual Lab system, each project has its own ID number. So that is being brought over. That ID number is also being brought over to NRDD to make it easily identifiable.
So to clarify, Every project that's entered in NRDD, whether it's imported or not, receives an NRDD ID, but we also have a field where you can add a separate ID number from your system so that you can cross-reference your individual data ID with the NRDD ID, and you could search for either one in our system.
Yes.
Is there anywhere in that area to explain what that second ID, what that personal ID is? So if someone's just putting in an ID and you have no idea what it is, is there anywhere to explain what that is?
Yes, because it's an open data field. So you can actually do the actual number. So the question is there a way to, next to that ID, let's say it's from Virtual Lab, it's a number, to explain what that means? And yes, you can. You can put it adjacent to that because it's an open data field, and you can put the number in, and then you can put the actual explanation next to it. But you would have to type that in.
Are users asked to explain what that is at all, or is it just?
The question is, have users asked for that explanation? And to this date, no one has asked for that.
I'm interpreting this as a suggestion that I think we could look into potentially adding, the ability for someone to add a note or something.
Maybe you'd even want like a drop down, like a control field, like a drop down menu, like VLab or I don't know, the other data, research database, symbol or whatever. Just a thought.
Yes.
To control it.
To control it, right? Yeah. So in the import records to date, I will make this comment, like for NOS NCOS system and from Virtual Lab, it'll say Virtual Lab import and then a number. And for NOS NCOS, it'll say that NOS NCOS database and then a number. So we'll know it's an imported record. Any other questions? Okay.
Future functionality for the reporting, would there be ways to track keywords or anything like that over time, so we can see trends in research and development?
Okay, this is the question is about future tracking in the keywords and keywords over time. And I'm gonna let my colleague Shanie respond to that one.
Yeah, so sort of what's the capability with the reporting program? The reporting tool has a lot of functionality. You could set up automated reports out to you. So you could have things emailed to you every so often. You could track things over time. I'm not sure I quite understand keywords changing over time.
Projects assigned to a keyword. More and more.
If more are growing in one area or another.
More and more research in this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you would probably be able to do that. I guess we could. Can we talk about the text thing we're thinking of? There's another type of system that we have not obtained yet, but we are exploring it, which would be text analysis. So the BI tool is very straightforward. It works with our data fields, right? But if you want to, and so yes, if you're just looking for information on which keywords did people choose, and you wanted to see on this date, like how many projects were under this keyword, and on this date, how many projects were under this keyword, I think that's something that you could do. If you were interested in looking at a number of projects and sort of searching their descriptions for trends, and sort of clusterings of topics over maybe over the different NOAA entities or geographically or anything like that, we're trying to combine our BI tool with this text analysis software that we're trying to obtain. It's going to be quite some time before we can get that, mostly because it needs to get through the federal security thing. That takes quite a while, but we are working with NIH on that. They have some really great technology. So,
National Science Foundation.
Oh, was it NSF? Not NIH, sorry. There are a number of groups though that are, I guess NSF is running it, but NIH is using it, yeah. Carrot, yes.
Okay.
That's the carrot.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question online.
Question online.
To have to wrap you guys up. You mentioned that NEPA was a more complicated kind of project.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the question is, we mentioned that NEPA was a little complicated. Can we elaborate on that? So we weren't trying to enter NEPA as a project. We were trying to create a field in NEPA, a field for NEPA, so that people could say, yes, we're in compliance with NEPA. But that was kind of me not understanding exactly what NEPA was. I was like, oh, it'll be a checkbox. That'll be easy to add. Turns out that every line office handles it differently, and it's a series of questions that ends up being a decision tree. And I realized this is more going to be a separate, entirely kind of database or module, something that might end up being linked to NRDD, but for now it wasn't as straightforward as I thought. So we have been speaking with the OAR NEPA director. She's in contact with the other NEPA directors, and we also, in our discussions with the NOS NCOS database, they do have fields, and it was when we saw their fields, we were like, oh, we'll just use yours. And we looked at theirs. It was a series of questions. We brought that to our OAR NEPA director, and she said ours would be an entirely different series of questions. And so that's where we realized this might be a little over our heads and out of our scope at the moment. We might instead have to create some sort of NEPA program website and link it instead to the database if NEPA directors decided they wanted to go that way. So we gracefully bowed out of that for now. Yeah.
So if there are any questions, I will just forward on to you guys after.
Yes.
Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really